Okay, Javier. So today's session, the title for today's session was on the possibility of a Jewish democracy in Israel. Now, I don't need to tell you, of course, especially in the last few months, this has become a very, very hot topic, both in Israel and outside of Israel, as people all over the world, Jews and non-Jews alike, are responding to certain initiatives and counter-initiatives that the government or sections of the government have initiated regarding the coherence or stability or validity of Israel's right to be recognized as a Jewish democracy. A lot of people talk about this subject matter, and sometimes one, like many other subject matters, experiences an inverse relationship between vocality and knowledge. And a lot of people share their opinions. Some are more learned, others are less learned. And I found it to be an acutely important topic to pass by without giving it some sort of attention, and also share with you or discuss with you the context of this debate, the way I see it, of course, not my take on it, in order for us to launch into a meaningful discussion about the trajectory of Israel as a Jewish state and as a democratic state. And I tell you right from the get-go, this is going to be it's a volatile issue. It's you'll see. It's sensitive. It's loaded. It doesn't come without its pack of problems. But as I always try to show you, if one tries to tackle a subject matter without due context, one sometimes loses the conceptual forest for its terminological trees. So we are trying, first of all, to understand the concept. So today's presentation is going to be divided into 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to suggest 5 ways which determine the perception of Israel, the concept of Israel, the land. I'm talking about the land, not just the people on it. The land of Israel. 5 ways to tackle that concept. And those 5 ways are Israel as an anticipated landscape. The second one is Israel as a covenantal landscape. The third one is Israel as a remembered landscape. The fourth one is Israel as a lived landscape. And the fifth one is Israel as an envisioned landscape. The second was covenantal. Okay, so we have anticipated, covenantal, remembered, lived, and envisioned. All of which are part of what I will try to show you, the ongoing Jewish discourse about Israel and its role. The second part of today's session will deal in broad brushstrokes with the Jewish response, mainly in Europe, the Jewish response to the emancipation, the Haskalah, as we call it, enlightenment, and what are the bearings of that response, or the responses. I will show you 4 responses, without which we cannot even begin to understand world Jewry in general, and Israeli Jewry in particular. And what are the implications of those responses to the establishment of Israel and to the nature of the state? And last, but not least, we'll deal with a secular document that is a canonized document nonetheless, and that is Megillat Atzmaut, Israel's Declaration of Independence. And we'll try to show how Israel's Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, was composed very, very quickly, in a few days, tries to, in so many ways, to articulate or bring into the discussion all the 5 landscapes which I'm going to talk about in the first part of the session, and to bring into dialogue all the different segments of Jewish response to the Enlightenment and emancipation, and why I argue, at least, that the type of liberal democracy a la Western Europe or the United States or Australia will be profoundly difficult to achieve in Israel. And why there is a reason, at least an argument for a reason, for Israel to try and articulate a democracy, but a democracy that does not force it to let go of its Jewish character. And we'll see what that means. So obviously, right from the conclusion of what I'm talking about, you see it's going to be a difficult discussion. Was this clear, the introduction? Okay. So let us start now with part number 1, and we'll deal with the first segment of part number 1, and that is Israel as an anticipated landscape. When we look at the biblical narrative, or more precisely the Pentateuch, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses in the Jewish narrative, we find the land of Israel, and I'm not talking about different names as Canaan and others, but we find the land of Israel as being associated first and foremost with a number of patriarchs. And then we find the land of Israel as being associated with the people of Israel once they are formed as a nation after the Exodus from Egypt. And then we find something very, very interesting happening. If you read what is being told after the event in Mount Sinai, and the very, very lengthy, right, exposition of mitzvot and what you're supposed to do and how they pertain also to the land, we find something very peculiar and very fascinating that happens in the Torah. And that is that the people of Israel receive very detailed information and instruction about a land which they had not yet seen, a land which they had not yet experienced. Everything we learn about from the Torah about the land of Israel, from the Torah about the land of Israel, when it comes to the people of Israel, is being given in Sinai, outside that land. In other words, what we find is a very, very interesting phenomenon. We find a relationship that is being established between a people and a land, not based on familiarity, but rather based on anticipation. That's why I called Israel a land. I'm using the language of let's go with the author of Narnia. C.S. Lewis. Israel is described in many ways as a land of deep magic. It is profoundly different from the place from whence you came. There is something different waiting for you there. We'll talk about it in a minute. It is a land that has an intimate relationship with your God. And I'm taking you back now to our first session, if you remember. And a lot of the things today are going to tie with all the sessions we discussed, hopefully. It is a land that requires one, as a Hebrew, later to be called a Jew, much later, to be very, very attentive to the covenant that one has with God, because that covenant also applies to one's relationship with the land which one has not yet seen. There is a build-up that takes place in the Torah. You can call it a positive build-up, a negative build-up, but it's a build-up, and it comes to full fruition at a moment when one saga ends and another one begins. The death of the prime leader Moses on Mount Nebo, overseeing or seeing the promised land. And once the people of Israel pass that line, move from the Sinai desert into the promised land, once this pledge is realized, we also leave the Torah. we start with the book of Joshua. In other words, the Torah in many ways is a build-up towards a realization of the relationship between the people of Israel and the land of Israel. It is an anticipation that is not based on knowledge. And mind you, that many of the Hebrews, at least according to the narrative, and I'm talking about narrative here, not about historical facts. I don't care so much about historical facts. I care about the story as it's being given. A lot of the Hebrews who left Egypt and on their way to the Promised Land never made it to the Promised Land, either because of natural causes or because of divine decree. But they never made it. It remained an anticipated land for them in life as in death. But from a national memory, from the aspect of national memory, there is a profound role to Israel as a land whose importance does not only rely on immediate familiarity. It is a land one anticipates to see, one builds into, but doesn't necessarily come into contact with. It's part of the narrative. This is one thing that I wanted to entertain in your thoughts. Israel as an anticipated landscape. Once we move into the book of Joshua, into the prophets, the section that is known as Nevi'im, we look all the different books that talk about the monarchy and then the divided monarchy. And what we see here is we see the attempts to realize that anticipated land as a covenantal land. Now I'm going to borrow again from another lecture that I gave you, where I tried to explain to you what I meant when I talked about Israel as a covenantal landscape. Anybody remembers the examples that we gave here? I gave at least 3. I'll give you the first one that I talked about. I talked about circumcision. You remember? No. That was when we talked about the Hebrew. Here, that was when we talked about the fruit, right? The orla. You remember the foreskin of the fruit of the tree, where the word that is being used there, orla, thickening, something that needs to be cast away, something that needs to be chopped off. In the biblical language, it is used for 4 different things. It is used for the foreskin of the penis, which is the most common use. It is used, but in all 4, it is used as something, as a thickening that stands beyond and stands between a certain element and its ability to understand the divine charge and fulfill it and correspond with it. So we have the foreskin of the penis is a covenantal act that brings the male closer to God and reminds the male of his pledge to divinity, his covenantal relationship with God.